welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this unboxing video, we are revisiting a game I've covered on the channel many years ago. And also, something I want to mention here is that the actual box design has changed, as you can probably tell. For those of us that have loved and played Arkham Horror, the card game, for years, or if you're a newcomer to the game, this design in terms of the core box is much better just in terms of its size. You'll see why when we actually start digging into it, as it follows a little bit closer to what Marvel Champions did in terms of its base box size, which then makes the base box much more useful, potentially storing cards inside of it. Now, this may not be a big thing for people that have an existing collection of the game, because by now you likely have figured out your own storage solution, but it is just nice to see that they've restructured the way this kind of comes out of the gates. And for those of us that are nuts like myself, where I've gone out and picked up multiple cores because I like having even more cards to deck build with, or to have pre-existing decks of investigators ready to go at any given time, I've picked up way too many cores of this game, and this just adds another to the pile. In the sleepy town of Arkham, Massachusetts, a small band of intrepid investigators seeks to uncover the nature of a sinister menace that threatens humanity, but beware, the arcane realm holds countless terrors, and the investigators must take care to maintain a tenuous grip upon their very sanity and survive. So we already know what Arkham Horror is mainly about. If you don't, pause the screen here, read the next paragraph. We are now going to dig inside this box. Let's open it up and find out what's inside. Now, just before we dive into the box, I wanted to pump the brakes for a second, because there is something worth mentioning here that did change. That is a big difference from the original core box. The original core box was obviously smaller in size, so it wasn't even usable as much of a storage solution at all, just because even horizontally or vertically, you couldn't store any cards inside of it. They all had to be laying flat, which just caused them to be in baggies, which meant that was pretty much useless, or, useful for a certain period of time until the card base expanded beyond belief. But at this point in time, with this revised core, it now expands itself for 1 to 4 players in terms of the number of cards it provides in this core set to allow you to build out up to 4 investigators and be able to play the game. So in essence, this solves a problem that many individuals, including myself when the game first arrived, kind of griped about, saying, well, the 1 to 2 player base set that was the original set was good, but I would have liked to have seen a 1 to 4 player set to just have more cards in that base set, because it forced me to actually have to go out and buy another base set just to get enough cards to kind of be happy with some of the deck building options, whereas they've resolved that old problem now by kind of making this a little bit of a bigger box and expanding the number of cards and the number of decks you can potentially build inside of this thing. So this will be a big time plus, mainly for people that are brand new to Arkham Horror, the card game. If you are somebody who is already deep down the well like I am, having the extra cards is just candy on top, because at this point I've already bought way too many of the base game in the first place. When you open up the box, the first thing you run into is the Learn to Play guide. The first thing you're going to think of if you're an individual who already has Arkham Horror, the LCG, on your shelf is, well, that rulebook's a bit bigger. And that actually goes for all 3 of the booklets. It's kind of surprising, really, because I'm so used to seeing the rules reference, the campaign guide for Night of the Zealot, and Learn to Play being much more of a cube, a square, a very small, tiny little thing that you have to thumb through. It's really weird to see these at full size now, and I might actually like this better depending on how things are laid out inside. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take a look in here. I have no idea whether they went through and combed over the rules reference and the Learn to Play guide to make them better, to make that whole learning experience and onboarding experience for new players better. That's something I'd have to do a side-by-side comparison with, and I'll probably be doing that separately outside this unboxing. So let's go ahead and dive into the Learn to Play, see what it looks like. We won't go through every single page because most of us have already seen this before, but I do really want to show you how the layout has changed, being that this book is larger. Here's a look at the first couple of pages. You have the game overview, the components listed out. It then jumps into a section called Fundamental Concepts and breaks down some very important things you need to know. And yes, indeed, I can confirm without even cross-checking with the other core rulebook, this has absolutely changed. These illustrations are different. The setup of the first game here is broken out in a completely different way than it was originally. So yes, I'm going to probably do a side-by-side comparison this off the video itself myself, just to kind of see how vast the changes are. But I now got a pretty good feeling I'll be tossing every single original rulebook that I have, as it looks like they did actually go through this thing and update stuff, which makes me really happy. I'm really liking this. This is an impressive change to the flow of the setup of the game in general, and it's so much of an impressive change. I had to actually dig into the Arkham Horror LCG box from the original base game and pull out the rulebook so we can actually literally compare this thing side by side. Here's a look at the original core rulebook. You'll see the first game setup, which we saw the first illustration of steps for, which looked really nice. Well, here in the original core rulebook, it's literally just walls of text from 1 all the way through to 7 with one single illustration in between. And you wonder why people got a little bit lost when they were trying to learn this thing, get things set up for the first time. Like, it was not exactly the best. It still worked. I was able to get my way through it. It's not like the rulebook was bad, but it could have been so much better out of the gate, especially for a game that is this popular. And then the sheets we just saw from the prior new rulebook for the scenario setup below, you'll see that scenario setup in the old one here. Again, very sparse in terms of illustrations and things to focus on, whereas if we just go ahead and move the old one aside, you've got breakdowns of everything that's important to note and things you need to understand as you set the game up for the very first time, including Lita depicted right here. Moving along to further pages, you'll see illustrations of the setup, the round sequence. Now I'm seeing tutorial tips standing out. I'm seeing things like advancing of the act deck standing out. There's different aspects of this rulebook that are doing a really good job. And the illustrations have been bumped up a notch as well. There seems to be just more of them in general, really to just provide clear understanding of what's actually happening on the game table when you do something mechanically within the game. Again, I'm not going to go through every page in this rulebook. I really just wanted to show you guys that it wasn't just a straight reprint. At the very back of the rulebook, you have the starter decks talked about. It also talks about strategy tips in terms of how to actually play these individuals. And of course, like it did in the original one, it's got the breakdown of how to build these decks. And that's going to do it for the Learn to Play guide. Now let's take a look at the rules reference. We're certainly not going to go over every page in that one, but I want to show you a handful of them. And if they've gone ahead and combed over this and changed it, that gives me a lot more confidence that they've gone into the rules reference and updated some of the things in there. Now, this is the booklet that actually gets me a little bit more excited than the rule book for me personally, because if I was going to reference anything, this would be what I'd actually be referencing, knowing that I already know how to play the game. So I'm excited to see, and I'll have to do a comparison in a little more detail because these things are a little bit more wordy and not as exciting to show visually, as there's not as many illustrations as typically just a bunch of definitions and how things actually mechanically work. But I will be digging through this book just to see how things have changed, because I am excited to see if they've bolstered up some areas that weren't exactly clear, or at least, solve some edge case questions that have been out there for years. Here's a final comparison shot between the original rules reference, which was much smaller in size, versus the larger one there underneath. The larger one, I've noticed, has a little bit bigger of a font going on, which makes just reading this text much easier overall, so I definitely prefer the larger one. The last booklet, we have seen this before. If you know Arkham Horror, the card game, this is the Night of the Zealot campaign booklet. Here's a look inside the campaign booklet. That's pretty much all I'm going to show of this, and now we're going to head inside the box and check out the punch board as well as the cards inside. Back inside the box, now you can see inside of it, and as I mentioned before, very similar to Marvel Champions in terms of what they did with the insert. They actually have something here that finally is useful for the core box experience in terms of storing cards. Again, for me personally, I have my own storage solution already, but this is going to be very helpful for newcomers. Of course, you have your tokens over here. It's just one board. Actually, that's not true at all. There's two boards, it looks like, worth of tokens here to punch out, and there's also a bag here. And look at this. This is actually kind of impressive. I was expecting it to just be a solid black bag and that's it, but and actually I didn't even know there was a bag inside of this, so it's kind of a twofold surprise here. Not only is there a bag to put the tokens that you are using all the time inside of this game to draw out of the bag, you have a bag to actually put them in now, and on top of it, it's actually a thematic match to the game too, which makes it even better. Now again, for those of us who have been playing the game for a long time, we probably went out and bought our own bags. I know I did already, but this is going to be a really nice addition for newcomers. Here's a look at the mini cards for each of the investigators inside this core experience. Now, normally in these unboxing videos, I would unwrap and go through every single card that is in here, but because these cards and this game have not gone through a major revision of anything that's changed, and my prior unboxing and my prior coverage of the game already includes everything you can expect to find inside the box. The cards have not changed. You're not going to get anything here that you can't get from the core game elsewhere, but what it does provide, from my understanding while going through these packs, is a better and more broken out experience for newcomers in terms of just understanding what is what. They have everything broken down in terms of each of the investigator decks in its own packaging and the player cards separately. So again, if you were starting around the table with a number of people or just playing solo and wanted to just dive right in, you've got your cards kind of already organized. And the same goes for each of the scenarios inside of this game as well. They're all pre-packaged into their own decks of cards, so it makes it easier to just set things up again on the side of the newcomer. So if you're an experienced player and you're coming back to this and you're wondering, is this worth it on its own? Probably isn't, because of the fact that you've likely already got yourself a better storage solution than this. You likely have already gone after a bag in order to draw tokens from, and the rulebook size changes as well as a couple of the illustrations and the onboarding experience has gotten better there, but most experienced players have already jumped over those hurdles and are far past those at this point. So really the only reason you might come back here as an experienced player is if you're going, well, I want to bolster my decks of cards, and maybe you really like what is offered in terms of the player cards inside of this core set and you just want more of them, then there might be a reason to grab this. But if you're a newcomer to the game, well, this is the thing to pick up now. You're going to want to avoid those smaller core boxes out there because this just provides a better jumping off point. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up this unboxing of Arkham Horror, the card game, the revised core box from Fantasy Flight Games. Really hope this helps you make an informed decision on it, whether you are an existing player of the game or a newcomer to the game. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about what you saw here. And as always, keep on rolling solo.